Have you ever stood in front of someone you love, opened your mouth to say something deeply true, and then swallowed those words like poison? It's not because you don't know what you're thinking. It's because there's a part of you that believes if you tell the truth, you'll be abandoned. The empath isn't silent because they have nothing to say. They're silent because they were trained to disappear. And tonight, we're going to uncover why. Picture this. You're 8 years old. You're telling your mom about something that happened at school, something that really mattered to you. Halfway through your sentence, she cuts you off. "Not now, honey. I'm busy." You learned something that day. Your truth wasn't urgent enough. Your voice wasn't important enough. Your feelings could wait. Fast forward to today. You're an adult, maybe even a successful one. But when someone asks, "What do you really think?" there's still that 8-year-old inside whispering, "Wait your turn, read the room first. Make sure it's safe." Meet Kate. She's 32, works in marketing, has a psychology degree. She can read people like novels, their micro-expressions, their unspoken needs, their hidden pain. But last week at dinner with her closest friends, when they asked about her recent breakup, she smiled and said, "Oh, I'm fine. Let's talk about something else." She wasn't fine. She was drowning. But somewhere deep inside, she didn't believe anyone had the patience to sit with her mess. You can hold space for everyone else's truth. But when it's your turn, you can't find the words for yourself. This is what Carl Jung called the split between persona and shadow. Your persona is the good listener, the understanding one, the one who never causes drama. It's the mask you wear, not to deceive, but to survive. Your shadow. That's the part of you that's tired of being careful. The part that has opinions, boundaries, needs. The part that wants to scream sometimes. The part you've learned to silence. It's like living with a microphone in your hand, but you only ever give it to other people. When it's your turn to speak, you pull it away, whispering, No, they need this more than I do." But here's what's really happening beneath the surface. You're not just being polite. You're operating from a wound so deep you've forgotten it's there. The wound that whispers, "Your truth is too much. Your feelings are too intense. Your voice will drive people away." Think about Kate again. She can spend 3 hours listening to her friend Jake process his anxiety about his job, his relationship, his fears about the future. She'll ask perfect questions, offer gentle insights, hold space for his confusion. Her attention is laser-focused, her empathy bottomless. But when Jake asks, "What about you? How are you handling the stress at work?" she deflects with surgical precision. "Oh, you know me. I'm resilient." Resilient. That's persona language, the socially acceptable version of her truth. Shadow language would be, "I'm exhausted. I'm questioning everything. I feel like I'm disappearing. I'm angry that everyone takes and no one asks what I need. I'm terrified that if I stop being useful, I'll be forgotten." Carl Jung understood something most people miss. He said, we don't just hide our darkness from others, we hide our light too. Your authentic voice, your real opinions, your creative fire, your righteous anger. That's threatening to a world that taught you to be convenient. You learned to perform understanding instead of demanding it. You learned to absorb other people's emotions instead of expressing your own. You became an emotional chameleon, shifting colors to match whatever the room needed. Green for envy, when someone needed you to validate their jealousy. Blue for sadness, when someone needed you to witness their pain. red for anger when someone needed you to rage with them. But chameleons don't have their own color. They become whatever keeps them safe. Here's the question that might break your heart open. What part of yourself have you silenced just to feel loved? Was it your anger? The part that wanted to say, stop, when people crossed your boundaries? Your sadness? The part that needed to grieve losses you never had permission to mourn? Your wild dreams? The part that wanted to create something beautiful instead of just fixing everyone else's brokenness? Your honest opinions about people? The part that could see through manipulation and wanted to name it? Maybe it was your need for solitude, your messy, complicated feelings about your family, your desire to be taken care of for once instead of always being the caretaker, your sexuality, your spirituality, your political beliefs, your creative, weird ideas that didn't fit into neat categories. The empath's dilemma isn't about being sensitive. It's about being so busy being what others need that you forget who you actually are. You've become fluent in everyone's emotional language except your own. And the cruelest part, the world celebrates this self-abandonment. They call you wise beyond your years. They say you're such a good friend. They praise your emotional intelligence. They give you awards for being the team player, the one who never complains, the one who always puts others first. But nobody asks, what did you have to kill inside yourself to become so understanding? Jung called this the transcendent function, the ability to hold opposite truths simultaneously. You can be gentle and fierce, empathetic and boundaried, understanding and unwilling to tolerate certain behaviors, loving and honest, kind and direct. But you've been taught that integration means choosing one side. Be nice or be honest. Be loving or be real. Be accepted or be yourself. Be helpful or be authentic. What if those were false choices? What if the reason you struggle to express yourself isn't because you lack communication skills, but because you've been trying to speak a language that isn't yours? What if your authentic voice doesn't need to be diplomatic? What if it doesn't need to make everyone comfortable? What if it's allowed to take up space to be inconvenient to ask for what it needs? Here's the truth that might shake you to your core. You don't struggle to express yourself because you're broken. You struggle because your authentic voice was never safe to begin with. Let me tell you about Luke. He's 38, a software engineer at a tech company in Austin, incredibly intuitive about people's motivations and needs. In meetings, he can sense the unspoken tension, the political undercurrents, who's feeling left out, who's about to quit. He's known as the team's emotional compass. Managers seek his advice about difficult conversations. Colleagues confide in him about everything from imposter syndrome to marriage problems. But Luke has never told anyone at work that he writes poetry. Beautiful, raw poetry about loss and longing and the weight of carrying other people's expectations. He's been writing for 15 years, filling notebook after notebook with verses that pour out of him like blood. He's good. Really good. His metaphors cut straight to the bone. His imagery stays with you for days. But he's never shared a single poem. Not one. They wouldn't understand, he tells himself. It's not professional. It doesn't fit the image. But that's not the real reason, and somewhere in his gut, he knows it. The real reason is this. When Luke was 12, he showed his dad a story he'd written about a boy who could hear the sadness in trees. His dad glanced at it for 10 seconds, maybe 15, and said, "That's nice, son. Maybe focus on math instead. That's where the money is. All this sensitive stuff won't get you anywhere in the real world." Luke learned something that day that carved itself into his nervous system. His creative truth wasn't valuable. His sensitive observations weren't useful. His inner world was a luxury he couldn't afford if he wanted to survive. So he became useful in other ways. He learned to code because it was practical. He became the one who reads the room because emotional intelligence was acceptable if it served productivity. He became the one who smooths over conflicts because harmony benefited everyone. But his own voice, his own creative fire, his own need to make meaning through words that got buried so deep, he almost forgot it existed. This is what Carl Jung meant when he talked about the Carl Jung shadow. It's not just our darkness we repress, it's our authentic power. Your shadow holds everything you've had to disown to survive your anger. Yes, but also your brilliance, your selfishness, but also your wild creativity, your difficult emotions, but also your inconvenient truths. Jung said something that might change everything for you. A man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them. You cannot heal what you refuse to feel. You cannot integrate what you continue to exile. You cannot become whole by cutting yourself in half. When you silence your authentic voice, you don't just lose connection with others, you lose yourself. You become a ghost in your own life, haunting the edges of every conversation, every relationship, every moment that calls for truth. Kate, the marketing professional I mentioned earlier. She finally understood this during a particularly dark night after her breakup. She'd spent the evening comforting her friend Sarah, who was going through her own relationship drama. Kate listened for 3 hours, offered perfect advice, held space for Sarah's tears, never once checking her phone or seeming distracted. But when Kate got home, she sat in her car in her driveway for 20 minutes and realized something terrifying. She felt more like herself when she was being a therapist to her friends than when she was just being herself. Who was she when she wasn't being useful, when she wasn't absorbing someone else's pain, when she wasn't performing emotional availability, when she wasn't solving problems or offering wisdom or creating safety for others? She didn't know. The question felt like staring into an abyss. That's the empath's Carl Jung shadow. We can become so invested in healing others that we lose ourselves. Not because we're generous, but because somewhere along the way, we learned that our worth was tied to our usefulness. We learned that love was conditional on our ability to meet other people's needs. We learned that our own needs were selfish, our own pain was indulgent, our own truth was too much. You've been trained to be an emotional vending machine. Put in care, attention, perfect understanding. Get out, love, acceptance, belonging. But what happens when the machine is empty? What happens when you need to be filled up instead of constantly giving out? What happens when you realize you don't even know how to ask for what you need because you've spent so long pretending you didn't have needs? Jung understood this. He called it the wounded healer archetype, the person who can guide others to wholeness precisely because they know the geography of brokenness. But the wounded healer's greatest challenge isn't helping others. It's learning to receive the same compassion they offer so freely. Here's what nobody tells empaths. Your sensitivity is not a burden to manage. It's a portal to truth. Your emotional intensity is not something to dim. It's a superpower to harness. Your need for authenticity is not selfish. It's sacred. But you've been living in a world that benefits from your self-abandonment, a world that needs you to be endlessly available, infinitely understanding, perpetually accommodating, a world that profits from your inability to say no, to ask for what you need, to center your own experience for once. What if you stopped? What if you spoke your truth, even when your voice shook? What if you shared your needs, even when they felt inconvenient? What if you allowed yourself to be seen in your full complexity? The light and the shadow, the wisdom and the wounds, the strength and the absolute exhaustion. Carl Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But here's what he also knew: it's the only path to genuine freedom. It's the only way to stop being a prisoner of other people's expectations. It's the only way to find out who you actually are underneath all the performances. Your voice isn't too much. It's been too little. Your truth isn't too intense. It's been too diluted. Your authentic self isn't too complicated. It's been too simplified for too long. You don't need to learn how to communicate better. You need to learn how to exist without apologizing for taking up space. Kate started small. She began writing every morning for 10 minutes. If I could tell the truth today, I would say, the first entries were fragmented, filled with fear. I would say that I'm tired of being everyone's therapist. I would say that I have dreams too, but I don't even remember what they are. I would say that I'm angry about things I've never admitted out loud. Day after day, she wrote. Some mornings the words felt like pulling teeth. Other mornings they poured out like a dam breaking. I would say that I forgive myself for disappearing. I would say that I'm ready to be inconvenient. I would say that my truth is not a burden. It's a gift I've been too afraid to unwrap. Luke took a different path. He started reading one poem out loud to himself each morning while he drank his coffee. Just to his reflection in the bathroom mirror, just to practice hearing his own voice, speak his truth without immediately apologizing for it, without explaining it away, without making it smaller. The first time his voice cracked. The words felt foreign in his mouth, like speaking a language he'd forgotten. But gradually, something shifted. The poems weren't just words on a page anymore. They were his voice, his actual voice. After 3 months of this daily practice, he shared a poem with his sister during a phone call. She went quiet for so long he thought the call had dropped. "Luke," she finally said, and her voice was thick with tears. "This is beautiful. I had no idea you had this inside you. I mean, I always knew you were sensitive, but this is art." "I forgot too," he said, and he realized that was the saddest truth he'd ever spoken. This is what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming who you actually are instead of who you learned to be. It's not about becoming perfect, it's about becoming whole. It's about integrating the parts of yourself you've been taught to reject. Authentic self-expression isn't a performance. It's not about finding the right words or the perfect timing or the most diplomatic way to share your truth. It's about remembering that your inner world has value, that your perspective matters, that your emotional reality deserves witness. You don't have to speak perfectly. You just have to dare to speak imperfectly. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to be willing to voice the questions. The empath's journey isn't about learning to be less sensitive. It's about learning to be sensitive on your own behalf too. It's about extending the same compassion inward that you've been giving outward. It's about becoming your own safe space first. Kate learned this when she finally told her friends about her breakup. Not the sanitized version, the real one. The one where she admitted she'd lost herself trying to be what he needed. The one where she confessed she'd been pretending to be stronger than she was. The one where she acknowledged she'd been performing stability while falling apart inside. Her friends didn't leave. They didn't judge her. They didn't tell her she was being dramatic or that she should just get over it. They moved closer. They said, "Thank you for trusting us with this. We were wondering when you'd let us love you back. We were waiting for you to be human with us instead of always being our therapist. Luke learned this when he finally shared his poetry at an open mic night at a coffee shop downtown. His hands shook so hard he could barely hold the paper. His voice cracked on the third line. But when he looked up, people were listening. Really listening. Not because his words were perfect, but because they were true. After he finished, a woman approached him with tears in her eyes. "That poem," she said, "it's like you reached into my chest and found words for something I've been feeling but couldn't name." That's the power of authentic expression. It doesn't just heal you, it gives others permission to be real too. Your authentic voice doesn't need to be eloquent. It needs to be honest. It doesn't need to be comfortable for others. It needs to be real for you. It doesn't need to fix anything. It just needs to exist. Jung said the Carl Jung shadow contains not just what we're ashamed of, but what we're afraid to claim. Your voice, your real voice, is probably in there, waiting, not because it's dark, but because it's powerful. And power in a world that benefits from your smallness feels dangerous. But you know what's more dangerous? Disappearing completely, becoming so good at being what others need that you forget what you need. So skilled at emotional camouflage that you lose your original colors. Kate no longer shares to be praised for being insightful or strong. She shares because she's truly present, to herself and others. She's learned the difference between being helpful and being real. Luke no longer hides his sensitivity behind his analytical mind. He's integrated both. He can solve technical problems and write about the human heart. He's no longer half a person. The empath's real journey isn't about learning to speak so others will listen. It's about learning to speak so you won't lose your soul. Carl Jung knew something that might change everything for you. Your vision becomes clear when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. You've been looking outside for so long, reading faces, sensing moods, adjusting your truth to fit the room. But what if you looked inside? What would you find there? Maybe anger you've never expressed. Maybe dreams you've never voiced. Maybe boundaries you've never drawn. Maybe love you've never declared. Maybe yourself. Here's a gentle practice. Each day, write one true sentence. Not profound, not perfect, just true. I felt sad when. I disagree with. I need. Start small. Your voice has been quiet for so long it might feel strange at first, like speaking in a foreign language you once knew fluently. Choose one safe relationship and practice not reading the room for one conversation. Just exist in your truth and see what happens. Your voice isn't too much. It's been too little. Your truth isn't too complicated. It's been too simplified for too long. The world doesn't need another person who's learned to be convenient. It needs you, the real you. Complex, contradictory, beautifully human you. Jung said integration isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming complete. You are already complete. You just forgot how to show it. Your voice isn't too much. It's just never been heard by the right people. You don't need to learn how to speak perfectly to be loved. You need to learn to love your authentic voice, even when it shakes, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's not what others want to hear. Self-expression isn't a skill to please others. It's a gateway to yourself. And you deserve to come home to yourself. If someone in your life needs to hear this, that their truth matters, that their voice has value, that they don't have to disappear to be loved, share this with them. because they might be silent, not because they have nothing to say, but because no one ever taught them they had the right to be heard. Your shadow isn't your enemy. It's your wholeness waiting to be reclaimed. Welcome home.